Morning, everybody. Welcome to Stigma Busters monthly podcast. My name's Scott. I'm going to be your host once again. I am joined with Crystal, Sarah, and Brian. Happy New Year, happy holidays, and grateful to be in this space with you today. This month, we're going to be talking about advocacy, what it is, how you get involved, and the different levels of advocacy, the different areas of advocacy, how you can be an advocate, and how you can even have an advocate for yourself as you go through systems of care and access resources and receive services throughout the communities that you live in. So, Brian, this is your first time joining us. Welcome. You want to tell the listeners and the watchers a little bit about who you are, why you're here, what you do, where you're from?
Absolutely. Well, right now I'm in my car, which I apologize for, but yes, thanks, Scott and Sarah and Crystal. I look up to you guys so much. I appreciate being a part of it. I'm in long-term recovery myself. I am from Connecticut, still living in Connecticut, and I'm now actually, besides being in recovery and a treatment advocate, I'm an treatment advocate for Recovery Centers of America and a recovery coach for the Heron Project. But additionally, my recovery is really my life right now. And whether I have that job title or not, I'm an advocate for recovery because I feel that everybody's recovering from something.
Right.
And it's my responsibility as a human being to be an advocate for people that need to figure out how to get to a place of hope and healing. So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Brian. And you're absolutely right. Recovery is so important, and it's as simple as it could be. I'm recovering from sugar, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be substance or trauma or abuse. I'm recovering from, an injury, right? There's a process to recover from multiple things. So let's just jump into the topic on, what is advocacy? And I think the conversation really should start with, being like most of us are, is a certified recovery peer advocate, and how we work with individuals in the community, accessing resources, meeting people where they're at, and advocating to resources and providers that they seek out, that they want to implement into their recovery, and making sure that at the bottom line that they have a voice in that waiting room, in that provider's office, and even as the paperwork's being filled out, that their responses are being heard and they're being implemented into the care system or the care program that's being developed for them. And, a lot of people that I've come across don't connect to resources because they've stated, I don't ever feel heard, or I'm forced on this medication, or I'm forced to participate in this care. Well, if you feel forced, did you have a choice? Did they give you an alternate choice? Or they just said, this is what we think is best for you, so this is what you're going to do? It may be best for me, in your opinion, but if I'm not willing to engage and accept it, I'm not going to participate to the point where it's going to benefit my recovery, my treatment for the long term. So what do you guys think about having an advocate at the table and in the waiting room and in the provider, with the provider in the care room?
I think that's super important. Definitely. I feel like, honestly, Sarah probably has something to say about this.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, it's something that I circle back on all the time, but I think that, over the past year and working with emergency departments, especially, it's really highlighted for me how important it is to have somebody be in those spaces, somebody who understands, what somebody's experience is. And I'm really happy that the conversation is moving away from coercive care. I think for a long time that we kind of felt that sort of punishment or coercion was a path towards recovery. And we're now kind of realizing that, even if something, what the provider thinks might be best for the individual, if they don't, maybe the individual would even select out that treatment option if they felt like, as Scott said, that they had a part in the conversation. But so often I don't think that people do. And so, yeah, I mean, one of my greatest passions in my work is really trying to bring, recovery coaches and peers and recovery advocates into emergency department spaces, which I could talk on forever, but I also feel that Brian, has some things to say about that as well with his recent work.
Yeah, so Brian, what's a little bit about the work that you're doing in regards to making sure that peers or advocates are in those areas, specifically focused on hospitals and other clinical settings?
Well, thank you, Sarah, for mentioning that, Scott. It's critical. I don't, to your point of where it's forced and where it's mandated, the likelihood of the recovery becoming long-term and taking place when the patient and the client recovery, however we're going to identify them, when they're not involved and they're not part of it and empowered by how it's going to work, chances are that it's not going to be as successful. So I think it's absolutely critical to be there. And I've had, spent the last 9 months in EDs, in emergency departments with the doctors and nurses and the emergency room secretaries, et cetera. They are absolute angels and warriors, and they're incredible people, and they're rock stars at what they do, and how they have so much coming at them though. And there's so many different moving parts in those emergency rooms where they don't have that lived experience and or the expertise that we have. We can definitely add value and help them identify what the avenues may be, where are the pathways we can help their patients with. And then just sitting across from a patient, we can have a much different conversation to then be a part of, not replace them, not replace the nurses and caseworkers, but just be a part of it and help collaborate with them to make sure that ultimately that the patient's deciding what their treatment should look like and what the next step should be. So to me, it's critical. It's very difficult to imagine for me, for my own recovery, if there wasn't somebody in the room that had a shared experience and was a recovery coach and had the training as a peer advocate to where I'd be without it. I don't know. So it's critical.
Yeah, and just to kind of continue on that thread, I think that it's worth noting, just in preparing and thinking about this conversation and the different levels of advocacy, of course, one thing that came to my mind was the removal of the X waiver, right? So that's like a federal level
Well,
change
Sarah,
that's occurred in our
what
field.
is the X waiver?
Right. So the X waiver was a requirement that was placed on physicians who would be prescribing Suboxone, which is a medication for opioid use disorder. It's a partial agonist that helps deal with cravings. It's a pretty low threshold approach for medication-assisted treatment. And previously, practitioners would have to go through, I believe it was an 8-hour training course, and this application that is now eliminated. And also there were limitations on the amount of patients that doctors could prescribe to. So all of that is eliminated. So there's this huge barrier that's now been eradicated toward medication for opioid use disorder, which is excellent. And I'm going to kind of weave through a little bit here now, because now that I'm talking about the X waiver, I think that there's something
We just had
about,
to get Sarah warmed up.
yeah.
We just had to get her warmed up. This is Sarah and Brian's world. They literally are at the forefront of changing not just this region, but ultimately, I think the way that the entire state of New York is changing the the system of care and how advocates are a vital aspect of that. So go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. And it's again thinking about that system of care. I think something that's very sort of exciting, an exciting piece of working in this world is that there are so many moving pieces and it's changing so much. I mean, whether again we're talking about policy level or even just, the illicit supply is changing a lot. So then there's education and outreach that corresponds to that. That can be very overwhelming, an overwhelming part of, working in this field, but it can also be an exciting one because there's always work to be done and there's always levels of advocacy to engage in. And so something that I find myself shifting between, the direct service, the interpersonal, the sort of more policy level work. And so I think that thinking about the emergency department space and the whole treatment landscape, again, this is a field where it requires a degree of expertise, right? And so that's something that peer advocates and particularly people that have went through and have lived experience of their own, they have the expertise at the level of understanding the treatment landscape and the different options available to people. And then that lived experience to be able to speak the language. And as with any other medical condition, having a specialist at your side is going to yield better results. And I think that that is really what peers, recovery coaches, CASACs, what they're bringing to the table every single day. And the last piece I'll say, and I'll pause because again, I could continue to go on, but is that I want to say what Brian, echo what Brian said, which is that hospitals have so much that's coming their way right now. So really, this is about supporting those people that have been working so hard, these heroes for years, and again providing an expertise sort of perspective and level of support to those people in those spaces as well as the individual that is going through addiction.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. And you said some really key words is I'm a recovery specialist, but I'm an expert in my own lived experience. Right. And being through multiple systems of care and going this way or going this way, we're given a choice, and having someone walk side by side with us is really right. That grassroots, bare minimum advocacy work that is crucial. And I think in the next, I think in the next 5 years, there'll be a requirement to have advocates at every level, because people are not able to cross the threshold or the front door of a provider's office alone. Nor do I think that someone's coming off the street experiencing displacement and heightened level of substance use disorder or mental health have the wherewithal to understand the jargon or the language, the medications, the tools, and even how to have communication with providers at multiple levels on how or what choices they have, or that they have choices, right? So I think there are multiple levels, like you said, Sarah, to this advocate work. And, each individual one of us has to see where we fit best, where we thrive, and where we're comfortable being an advocate, because I don't think there's just one space to be an advocate. I think you can be an advocate at multiple levels. Brian, do you have any more feedback?
Sorry, I had a little trouble with the mute button. No, I think you just nailed it. The point you brought up about the state of mind of the human being in need, that they need someone there to help them guide them the right way and help them find the right pathway and make the correct choice, because it can be overwhelming. Just walking into a hospital in the right state of mind is overwhelming, and having to make decisions about your health. And if you add to it wherever they may be with their substance abuse and their disease, it's just a critical place for us to be and to offer our support and our services.
Right. So just thinking about the multiple levels of advocacy, again, when I started to talk about the X waiver, it reminded me of a situation that was going on in one of the counties that I was covering, which I anticipate we'll see some more of this. But this was about a year ago when it was brought to my attention that some people were having trouble getting their Suboxone prescriptions filled at certain pharmacies in one of the counties that I was covering. And there were people that were engaged in this work, from like the commissioner to like a nurse practitioner at a hospital that wasn't even working in that county, to, I mean, so many people at so many different entry points in the field of addiction, and so many different like job titles. We're all working to where people, we were writing letters to legislators, we sat in on DEA calls, and finally the pharmacies that were stating DEA limits and things like this, we were able to do outreach, again, advocacy at basically every level, and education. And that medication now is available to individuals, and they're not experiencing those barriers, which, again, thinking about how hard it is to get into the door, you get into treatment, you've got your medication, and then you get to the pharmacy, and here's another barrier, right? This field is so interesting that way, in that there are so many, there's so many barriers along the way external to the individual. And so again, and then internally, obviously, when you're in a state of active addiction, there's so much going on there. And again, having that person be by your side, but then those people also at those multiple levels of advocacy. To kind of wrap this all up, I do anticipate that with the removal of the X waiver, if we see more Suboxone prescriptions happening, probably this will happen at more pharmacies, right? Where they have been ordering a certain amount of Suboxone, they're worried about caps, et cetera. And there will probably be the need to go and advocate and educate pharmacies about the removal of the X waiver, and why this is maybe leading to an increase of this medication. And, again, reviewing the fact that there aren't DEA caps, et cetera. So there's kind of, with every, that's a win with the X waiver, but I can already, from, working at multiple levels, see the next sort of barrier that might come out of this. Which, again, it can be overwhelming, but it can be exciting, to kind of, there's just so much work to be done. And if you're like up to the challenge, there's just any day you could pick so many different levels that you could advocate for folks for. And, I feel grateful to be in the position where I have the ability to do that.
Yeah, there are a lot of levels. And not just one person can be at all the levels, right? So I think advocacy as a system needs to communicate together. At this level, we're advocating for this, which is going to impact this, which is going to impact this, and they all need to communicate and work together for an end goal, right? And making sure that the end goal really is to get individuals connected to different systems of care. And I remember a few years ago, I was a member of a statewide grassroots program. And for the first 6 months, it was only 3 of us covering the entire New York State. And we were like, oh, okay, we have this goal and we have this bill and we have this legislator and all of those things. And then month 10, we were like, we can't do any of this with just 3 people. And it's so unfortunate that so many grassroots programs don't have longevity, because not enough people either know about it, or people are just like, oh, I don't have time. All right. So many people, like the email thread, the people that said that they wanted to participate was hundreds. But for 10 months, it was only, I think the most we ever had was 5 people, but consecutively it was only 3 of us. We did sign some bills and we did advocate at the state level a few times, but there was really no long-term effect. So I think just staying connected and finding a group of advocates to work together, because we're, again, just like everything that we do, we are stronger together. Sarah and I have worked in regards to the hospital arena for a few months now, and we're like, well, you're doing that and I'm doing this. We're doing the same thing, looking to have the same conversations with the same people, and we're both getting negative feedback, for lack of better terms. But once we came together, we're like, the response was like, oh yeah, we'll have meetings with you. And we're like, okay, all it took is two people who already know each other, already know both systems that they're working on. And we had a conversation, okay, how can these work together? We figured that out. How do we deliver it together? We figured that out. And now we have meetings set up in the next month to, again, advocate at a very high level with decision makers. Because we can go boots on the ground advocating and handing out flyers, but is that flyer going to get to the person that's going to make decisions to make changes? Most likely not, because it's going to take 10,000 flyers, but it'll take one meeting with one decision maker to have a snowball effect to reach more decision makers.
But what I love about working with you, Scott, is that we also, a year ago went to every library in one of the counties we
Yeah.
covered, giving out flyers.
We literally went to every library.
Every single, over 2 days, to work on, access to care for folks, behind in the technology gap in rural areas in one of the counties that we're covering. So,
Yeah.
again, where, I think that it's also, and some of what I'm kind of hearing is just thinking about also burnout and advocating for yourself. And that's one thing that I love about finding like kindred spirits to work with, is that for me, it can be refreshing to move through the different channels of advocacy. So sometimes when you're in those, really intense rooms with the decision makers, that can be really invigorating. And sometimes, just the boots on the ground and handing out food to people on a Tuesday evening in Poughkeepsie, sometimes that's what my heart needs, and that's where, like, again, I try to not be overwhelmed by how much needs to be done, and rather try to work with myself and find like-minded people who invigorate me to work with at these different levels. I feel that helps with longevity, because there's so much, it's definitely not a sprint, it's a marathon. There's just so much to be done at so many levels. But yeah, I can't say enough. I found when I came into the field, that there's so many silos and so much kind of isolation. And that's been one of the things I'm most passionate about as well. And you too, Scott, is just like breaking down those silos and working with people at every different level. I think it's so important.
And I think being an advocate gives you insight on how silos will never work. They will, it's impossible, because providers and care providers need patients. Patients need providers, but one provider cannot serve every person. And not one silo or one agency can deliver multiple services or multiple levels of advocacy without partnerships and collaborations. And one of the huge, obviously, movements in the peer movement is implementing peers in and at every level of care. Well, not one peer agency can do that. And working at ILI, we have 37 peer programs. I'll be the first one to say we can't do half of what is needed. So my passion is absolutely to break those silos, to bring more people in to our cohort of advocates, to break the silo system and to create one system of care that connects all providers all the time together to serve the one individual that has not been served. So Brian, what's your favorite level of advocacy? And how did you get connected to it? That's what I want to hear. How did you get connected to your favorite level of advocacy?
Well, my how I got connected is I have no idea what I was doing, and I still, it was just being boots on the ground and rolling up my sleeves and saying, well, I got to do something, and I could sit around waiting for the perfect time or for all the perfect certifications, and it was like, let me just show up and see if I can help out. And just that to me is 90% of the battle, is just suiting up and showing up. And so it happened, kind of happened by mistake, Scott. I just was in a meeting where someone was saying that they had a hole, and and they had a barrier, and I volunteered to help. It had nothing to do with my job, and still doesn't. And it's the right thing to do. And someone did it for me, and it's because I'm in recovery. And when I was in my active addiction and in my alcoholism, I didn't see the need to be that type of a community member. And I'm so grateful that I do now. So it just was the right thing to do. And now that I'm doing it, and I meet you and Sarah and Crystal and everybody else and all of the heroes at the ED, it's like it fuels me. And so my level is still very boots on the ground, still very grassroots. And I really appreciate my background is more sophisticated, on a higher level of business and having those type of conversations. But for me, where I get my passion, and it becomes absolutely, it grows the more that I do it. And it's on the ground, and it's with people that need help. And it's the challenge I see when you talk about those silos, it astounds me. I worked for a big beverage company, and the competition, competitive balance between consumer brands is one thing, but the competition in silos amongst providers and treatment providers is like, really, we're helping people. And if we can break down that competition and do it all together, it's people need help, and we have the means and the training to do it. So I'm all in. I just learn every time I'm around all of you and around the heroes in the hospitals. I learn more and more, and just want to continue to do it. So it's contagious to me. This conversation is exciting, and it's having a passion for it and being with, like, as you said, Sarah, I echo what you were saying. I'm being around people that have the same type of passion, like-minded. It becomes contagious, and there's more people we can help. Right now, there's somebody sitting in our county right now, many people that need one of us sit next to them to try and help.
And they are not on the other side of the county. They are 2 minutes down the road. Maybe even sitting right next to you. If you're in an office, it could be the person right next to the office. It could be someone stopped at the traffic light. You see at least 10 people every day.
I'm about to walk into a hospital. Yeah, I don't know how many, and it's scary and exciting. I don't know. Every day looks different and what I'm going to walk into, but there are wonderful, awesome individuals, human beings that just need someone to sit across from and look them in the eye and be there to help.
Yeah, and that leads to, right, we have, let's just say, tens of thousands of people that need advocacy, right, at the individual level. So that brings up, part two of the conversation is, how do people become advocates? How do they get connected to different levels of advocacy? And I think that's just signing up, right? You don't have to get paid to be an advocate. If you want this to make this a career path, you can reach out to any 5 of the agencies, because Brian has 2 because he's fancy. And all of our agencies would love to have you join our advocacy efforts, because that's how it works. You don't have to have a master's degree. You don't have to have a doctor's degree. You just have to have a heart of service. And at the bare minimum, that's all it is. Like Brian said, every day is different. I didn't come into work thinking that within the first 30 minutes, I would have to get someone into treatment. The first 3 hours, I didn't know that I was going to have some other issues with individuals, but that's what today brought. So here we go. So if you want to get connected and you want to be an advocate, whether it's a recovery advocate or a political advocate, just reach out to one of us and we'll be more than glad, again, to walk side by side with you to become an advocate, because we are outnumbered 100%. And I think, Brian, you made a good point regarding the silos, is that, I'm going to say it. I hear often, oh, we don't have enough resources because we don't have enough funding. I wonder how much unspent funding goes because silos exist. I have funding. Listen, if an agency said, come, well, let's partner. Okay, you can use my funding. Take it. Like, it's not my funding. It's my community's money. That money is to help serve the community, not me. I don't get paid more or less depending on how much I spend. That's ridiculous. It's about how much we can support our community. And I think that's where the silos really are coming into fruition, is when people have more advocacy conversations, that we need to advocate that funding is not a restriction. It's how we use the funding that is a restriction. And if I have more people at the table with more funding, we can spend more funding to help people get connected to services. And that's what advocacy is about at a higher level, like a financial level. But it all comes down to, like what Brian says, is that boots on the ground. That's just where it has to happen, because we have to meet the people where they're at. What do you got to say, Crystal? I know you're smiling and I'm getting thumbs up. You have any feedback?
I mean, of course I do. I mean, for me, I think how I got involved in advocacy is through my training. When I became a CERPA, certified recovery peer advocate, I had no idea what I was doing. I was just a person in recovery. And like you said before, it's in my heart to help people. It's my life and my love and my passion. I wouldn't be where I am if I didn't have the help from others. So when I started learning how to become a recovery coach, I was like, what can I do? What can I do? Who do I talk to? How do I learn? And getting involved with Friends of Recovery in New York and joining their monthly meetings and getting on the Alumni Association meeting and just jumping on every single meeting every month that I possibly could to learn the language and allow people to see my face, and say like, hi, I'm Crystal and I'm a person in recovery. Like, how can I help? And like Brian said, I just stumbled upon things like completely by accident. And those were like the best accidents ever, because once I learned about, how I can advocate for my state, I was like, I'm all in. I want to be on the front line. Give me the sign, give me the microphone. I'll do the things. And getting involved in the advocacy events around the state, like Stand Up for Recovery Day, recovery funding, Federal Day of Action, fighting for policy and fighting for funding and housing and transportation, and being able to stand up and say, I'm a person in recovery and I vote, I work, I pay taxes. This does work if we work together. And, the biggest thing with Friends of Recovery New York is nothing about us without us. Nobody can do this without us standing up and saying that and being the face and voice of recovery. It's, initially being a person in recovery, I never understood, like the back end of the policies and bills and how I could really advocate. And this is like, I don't know, this is just where my passion is now. I absolutely love it. I love being an ambassador for the state. And when we have big events coming up and we get to all go to Albany together and we leave those days and I just feel so full. I feel like spiritually full, like ready to take on the world, And a lot of these people I see on Zoom all the time, and we don't get to see each other face to face, but I know that there's people all around this state that are fighting for the same things that I am. And I mean, it makes my own personal recovery that much stronger, because why would I ever do anything else? Why would I not continue to fight for that? So yeah, I like Sarah, I could talk about this all day because I just love it. I just love it.
A quick plug, February 7th from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. we will all be at the Egg in Albany for Stand Up Recovery Day. So if you want to stand up for recovery, and this being a recovery focused podcast, I think it's a huge avenue and opportunity for us to show up with signs, and I can put one in the link. You can print out your own sign. I stand up for whatever you want to stand up for, whatever you as an individual want to stand up for and represent and be an advocate for. That is the place to start. There, Crystal, way to go. Yeah. That was not.
I'm already prepping all my people.
Yeah. This is an unedited podcast, so that was not planned, but that is the sign. So come out and join us. I know I will be there. I'm sure Crystal has to be there. And Sarah, I'm
definitely
not sure if
be.
Sarah's coming. I'm pretty sure she would be. Yeah. And yeah, Brian, I didn't think any of you would miss the day. So we'll all be at the egg holding up signs. You can message us on Facebook. You can call us, contact us, come meet us. We will be there standing up for what we believe in, and what we believe in is person-centered care and the success and the benefits of finding freedom and joy in long-term recovery. So thank you everyone for joining us this month. Next month, please join us. We will be talking about codependency. It's going to be a big one next month. So I know I, at some level, definitely have struggled with codependency and still do. I think all of us do. So come hang out with us next month and we'll dive deep into one of those big topics around recovery, codependency. So my name's Scott. I love myself on purpose today. Thank you for being here and thank you for being authentic.
My name's Crystal. I love myself on purpose today. And thank you so much again, as always, for having me.
My name is Sarah. I love myself on purpose today, and I'm so grateful to share this space with all of you, as always.
My name is Brian. I love myself on purpose today and very grateful to be here. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Peace and love, everybody.